This is a collection of the creepiest stories from Reddit. Well, enjoy listening. Story number 1.
I'm Claire, originally from Idaho, but I've spent the last 3 years living in Portland, Oregon. After my divorce, I left my small hometown where everyone knew my family and tried to start fresh. I work in tech support for a major company and often go into the office, so I'm rarely home. I live alone in a small 2-story house divided into 4 apartments in one of Portland's quieter neighborhoods. Mine is on the ground floor. I've never seen the upstairs tenant. The landlord once mentioned that the unit is rented by an elderly woman, Mrs. Ellis, and that she values her quiet. I've never run into her. In 3 years, I haven't seen a single visitor go into or out of her apartment. She herself only seems to leave once a month. I sometimes wondered how she eats. She must stockpile food. Her lights are rarely on. No footsteps. No voices. It often felt like no one lived up there at all. Until one strange evening. I got back from yoga around 8 and noticed water dripping from my kitchen ceiling. The smell wasn't musty, it was animalistic. Like wet fur. I tried calling the landlord, but he didn't answer. I knew I had to talk to the upstairs neighbor, as much as I hate confrontation. There wasn't really another option. I wasn't about to freeze and get sick in my own home. Mrs. Ellis's door was slightly ajar. That made me uncomfortable, but I knocked anyway. I heard shuffling, floorboards creaking. A few seconds later, she appeared, a woman in her 60s, long gray hair tied in a bun, wearing a dark green shawl and old-fashioned beaded jewelry. She looked at me, expressionless. "Good evening. Sorry to bother you, but I think there's a leak. It's dripping into my apartment." She stared for a few seconds, then suddenly opened the door wide. "Come in. You already felt it, didn't you?" I hesitated, then stepped inside. The air was thick and damp, like stepping into a greenhouse, but with a sharp, unsettling smell of wet earth, mold, and something meaty. Water stains covered the floor. I stepped onto the carpet and immediately felt the squish. It was soaked through. The walls were marked with strange symbols, drawn with what looked like filthy fingers. Hanging from the ceiling were odd little bundles, dried twigs tied with string and hair. Some of them looked organic. "Where's the leak coming from?" I asked, trying to keep my fear in check. "They were playing," she said, eyes drifting toward the dark hallway. "Who?" She didn't answer. I walked a little further. On the wall hung an old family portrait. I stopped. It was her, much younger, beside a man in a suit. Between them stood 2 children. But their faces were smeared over. Not scribbled out, smeared, like with dried mud. It was deeply unsettling. My back started to sweat. Something about her wasn't right, and I had no idea what she was capable of. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow. I turned quickly, already on edge. A fox peered out from around the corner. A real one. Alive. "This is May," the woman said. "Jasper's around here somewhere. They're tame. Rescue foxes. I saved them when they were babies." I froze. The fox looked aggressive and battered. She looked like she'd been in a fight with a bear. I think her hind leg was mangled. It was bleeding onto the soaked carpet. The hallway floor was wet too, but not from the leak, more like something ran through with muddy paws. That smell I noticed earlier, this was it. "They love water," she said. "Sometimes they escape to the garden. It rained yesterday. They played in the puddles like children." I wanted to call her out. "What garden?" "There's no garden. Just a couple flower beds by the front steps." If anyone saw these ragged, filthy foxes, they would have reported it immediately. I was about to ask her about the actual leak when I heard something. A sound like a child laughing. I froze. "Is that a TV?" She didn't answer right away. Then she gave me this heavy look. "I've been alone for a long time, but sometimes it feels like someone else is here. Don't be afraid. The house is old, it has its own life. Just then, I saw a cockroach crawl through her hair. Yes, a real, living cockroach. I nearly gagged. I looked around the room. In the corner stood a baby crib. Empty. Perfectly folded blanket. Beside it, a dusty teddy bear. Another cockroach was crawling across its face. My skin crawled. I had a son, she said, catching my stare. He died. He was only 3. Sometimes I leave toys out for him. I mumbled something like, I'm so sorry. We all cope in our own ways, she whispered. I have to say, the apartment was filthy. When I finally took it all in, I saw dozens of cockroaches. On the walls, doors, windowsills. I must have been too distracted at first to notice. My immediate thought was to seal up every vent and crack in my own apartment, just in case they came down. I checked the bathroom. The faucet was fully open, not just leaking. Water was pooling across the floor, mixing with something dark and red. My stomach turned. It looked like she was trying to wash something off the floor. Maybe that's what caused the leak. I'd never seen such squalor. The only remotely clean space was the baby's crib. Everything else looked like it had been dragged in from a landfill and never cleaned once. We agreed she'd mop it up and turn off the tap. As I was leaving, the second fox, Jasper, raced past me and stopped at the door. He stared at me, right in the eyes. And then I heard another voice. Soft, whispering. A child's voice. My heart nearly exploded. I bolted for the hallway. She didn't stop me, just watched me leave. When I shut the door behind me, I noticed something scratched into the wood. Etched with a knife. Down is bad. Up is worse. Now I'm sitting in my apartment wondering if I should call the police. Or animal control. Who even handles something like this? That apartment isn't just full of foxes. Something else is in there. Mrs. Ellis looked like she'd gone completely mad. You know the kind of urban crazy? Dresses like it's the 1800s, muttering to herself? That was her. And the apartment matched. And seriously, can you even keep foxes in an apartment? 2 of them? Maybe I was just overwhelmed with fear, but this can't be normal. Wounded, neglected foxes in a roach-infested, half-flooded apartment? That's not okay. They could have rabies. Infections. Who knows? What did I witness tonight? Something paranormal? Or just a very disturbed old woman who shouldn't be living alone? I've lived in this house for 3 years and never imagined that kind of nightmare was happening right above me. The leak still hasn't stopped. But one thing's for sure. I'm never going back up there. Not for anything. My heart still hasn't calmed down.
Story number 2.
I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange sensation, as if something was crawling next to my face. I was still asleep, and I didn't immediately understand what was happening. It was hot, stuffy, the window was slightly open, and I thought, probably a mosquito. I waved it off and rolled over hoping to fall asleep again, but sleep did not come. Instead, there was movement inside my ear. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Well, that couldn't be right. I sat up in bed, felt my ear, even shook my head, nothing. But when I lay back down, it moved again, as if tiny paws were scraping along the eardrum itself, quickly, uncertainly, as if looking for a way out. Panic seized me. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the mirror in the bathroom. I turned on the light, pulled my ear back, looked inside. Darkness. Nothing. I can't see it, but it's there. I can hear it. It's trapped somewhere deep inside, and it seems like it doesn't want to come out. It started itching. Not the usual kind, but the kind that makes you want to scratch half your head off. I started hitting my ear, jumping on one leg, tilting my head down, pouring water in there, nothing. And then there was movement. Sharp, feverish, as if it panicked. Me too. It was trying to break free, but in the wrong direction. I thought I could hear it rustling, scratching my ear canal with its paws. I screamed, cried, howled, all mixed up that I wanted to cut off my ear just to make it stop. I ran into the emergency room barefoot, in my pajamas with disheveled hair and wild eyes. The nurse rose from her chair in fear. I almost screamed, "There's something alive in my ear." They took me to the office. I couldn't sit still. I was shaking, holding my head, trying not to cry. The doctor came in sleepy, but after he looked into my ear, his eyes widened. "Oh, yes, there's someone there." They laid me down on the couch. They brought a lamp, took the tweezers. I felt something cold touching my ear, then pressure, a pinch, and then it moved again. The doctor pulled his hand back. "It's going deeper. We need to get it out immediately." I wasn't breathing. After a few agonizing minutes, they pulled it out. A cockroach, a real one, brown, fat, alive. It writhed in the tweezers, its legs still twitching. The nurse dropped the tweezers in fear, 257, and they fell to the floor with a nasty sound. I felt myself retching. "Don't look," the doctor said, pushing me away. "Better not," I cried. It seemed to me that he was still inside, like a phantom pain, like an obsessive feeling that someone had just tried to explore you from the inside with paws. My brain refused to accept it as reality. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I constantly checked my ears. I taped them with cotton wool. I put on a hat. I couldn't go into the bathroom without the light on. And the cockroach, he was probably just hungry, or wanted warmth, or accidentally wandered in there. But now he lives in my head forever. I still wake up sometimes from the movement in my ear. And every time I think, he's back. But the worst thing happened later. When it was all over, formally, I was sitting at home, unsettled. One thought was spinning in my head. Why? Why me? This is impossible. I started searching for information, forums, medical articles, Reddit, YouTube, like I was possessed. I read about a man in India who had a whole nest of insects found in his ear. About a woman in Texas who was bitten by a cockroach inside her head. I called back to the hospital. I asked the doctor if there was any way to check. Was there really just one? What if there were 2 of them or more? For 36, what if he left something behind? I heard him scratching. I remember that sound. It can't be that he was alone for so long, so deep. The doctor tried to calm me down. They removed everything. You're healthy. This happens especially in the hot season. Does it happen? Does it happen? I woke up at night from phantom movements. My brain was throwing me scenes where he was crawling back inside, or worse, hatching from an egg which he had left deep inside my ear. I even went to get an MRI. Not because I needed to, but to make sure there was nothing left. But that didn't help either. I felt like I was going crazy. I heard sounds, rustles, clicks. Sometimes even on the other side of my head, as if he had left a mark, a dent, a scratch on the tissue of my brain. My friends said that I was just nervous, that it was trauma and it would go away. But it didn't go away. I stopped trusting my silence. My ear became an enemy. I could hardly go outside. I stopped sleeping with the window open. I only fell asleep with earplugs and woke up, yanking them out in a panic, checking if there was anything alive inside. And yet I can't shake the thought. What if he didn't come out completely? What if he's still there, deep down, dead, but still clinging to my brain with his little paws? What if he didn't come out completely?
Story number 3.
Sometimes childhood fears don't go away because they were real. I'm already 35, but there's one story from my childhood that I can't forget. Sometimes I dream about it as if it were all happening again. I was 13, an ordinary day, summer, hot. My friends and I were hanging out in the yard, kicking a ball around, fooling around. And then my neighbor, Bill, came running. His face was as pale as chalk. "Guys," he gasped. "My cat." He climbed into the old basement. "Help me get him out, please." We knew that basement, abandoned, boarded up with a rusty sign on the door that no one could read for a long time. They said that it used to be a warehouse or a shelter. It looked like they were trying to forget it on purpose. The door was indeed nailed shut. The four of us barely managed to pry it open with a crowbar that one of the guys brought. Inside, it smelled of dampness, mold, and something else. Some strange, musty smell that sent shivers down your spine. We went inside with flashlights. The walls were peeling. The concrete was cracked. We went down the narrow stairs one after another until we heard a quiet meow. The cat was found quickly, sitting in the corner, scared but unharmed. We were about to leave when suddenly there was a cry. Not just a child's cry. It sounded muffled as if from far away and somehow unnatural, as if someone was trying to imitate how crying should sound. We looked at each other. We decided that maybe someone had gotten in here. Maybe a tramp with a child. We called out, "Hey, who's there?" Silence, only drops of water somewhere in the depths of the basement. "Maybe someone got stuck," whispered Saryoga. We started to go down deeper. The steps became steeper, the air heavier, and then a voice rang out. "Mom, is that you?" It was a child's voice, but there was something alien about it, unnatural, as if it wasn't a child speaking, but something that was trying to be one. The voice was distorted, like a film that gets stuck in a tape recorder. "Who's there?" I asked, not so confidently. Silence. We stood there not knowing what to do. We wanted to run, but our legs seemed to have grown into the concrete. And then that voice again, closer now, almost there. "Mom, they took my paintings." "Paintings? What paintings?" I felt a cold sweat run down my back. We didn't bother to figure out what it meant. We ran, headlong, stumbling, gasping for breath, clutching the cat to our chest. I remember the light from the flashlight jumping along the walls, picking out strange symbols, scratches, as if someone was leaving messages with their nails. We ran out into the street and slammed the door behind us. None of us ever told our parents what happened in the basement. We just kept quiet and tried to forget, but we couldn't forget. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I hear that voice through my sleep, through the walls. "Mom, they took my paintings." And every time I wake up in a cold sweat, I still think about that phrase often. What did it mean? What paintings? Who was it, and what or who was making that voice in the darkness of the dungeon? Sometimes I catch myself thinking that it was too real to be just a fantasy, but at the same time, too implausible to be real. The strangest thing is that we never talked about it again. Not with Bill, not with the others. It's as if someone or something erased it from our memories. We didn't agree to keep silent, just forgotten all at once. What do you think it was? Just a childish fantasy, an overtired teenage brain, or something truly terrifying that we were lucky enough to escape alive? Have you ever had something like that? A childhood memory that haunts you even years later? How do you explain such things?